everyone, welcome back to my channel, and for those of you here with me for the first time, I'm Melissa Reed and I'm a mixed media artist. So I have a few things in front of me here today. I've got Liquitex matte medium both in a liquid and in a heavier bodied gel form. And I've also got some Rowney Indigo acrylic ink that I'm going to be using, as well as some metallic foil adhesive, which I'll be using with some metallic foil. And I also have these tissue paper squares that I've cut, and this is an acid-free tissue paper that I found on Amazon. I'm going to have a link for that, plus all of the other things that I'm using here today listed in the description of my video. I'll also have links to all of my more commonly used items that I tend to use in all my videos, so be sure to take a look at that if you would like. But I had a vision in my head, and that doesn't usually happen, so just stick with me here and we are gonna just see how it all plays out. Okay, so I have my tissue paper squares there, and my plan is to crumple those all up, and I have those arranged. I did a round of these on a plastic tarp sheeting that I cut, and I did some on parchment paper because I just wanted to see if I would be able to easily remove them when they're done from the parchment paper, and one is not better than the other, so if you have access to one of those things, I would recommend you use whatever you have, because that peeled right up off of both of them. And I'm wetting them just with some water and spraying, putting a little bit of that ink down, spraying them again, and just letting that ink move all around. And where it is gathered, it's going to pick up some of that texture. They do get a little lighter when they dry. I did a couple of rounds of these. I did one round and I thought some of them were a little too dark and I wanted some lighter ones. So you'll see later in the video that there's definitely more than the ones that I have here that I'll be working with. So I did end up mopping up some of the extra liquid on here, and this is what I ended up with. I have them all sitting on a 12 by 24 canvas, and I'm just loosely drawing in some pencil marks where they, not exactly tracing them, just loosely where they're located on that canvas. And you can see that's a canvas that has some paint and ink dripped and spilled on it already, which does not matter at all because that's all going to be covered up. So the plan that I had in my head was to have some copper foil visible between the sheets of tissue. So if you can envision those kind of like tiles, the copper foil that's going to be peeking through is just going to be like in the cracks of that. So you'll see here in a second. So I am applying the foil adhesive now, and that'll have a cure time of about a half an hour before you can lay the foil down. So I did apply that and then let it dry. And incidentally, the blue tiles that I made also dried overnight. Okay, so there's the copper foil that I'm using, and I was not really trying to be very careful. I didn't need to be. I'm just laying them down to cover as much as I can with one tile and then brushing the excess off with a, that brush is a pretty stiff bristled brush just to be able to move it around. And I just keep continuing in this manner until all of that adhesive is covered up with the foil, as you can see here. And once I've got all of that done, I have a much softer brush that I use just to brush all of the little crumbs off of the surface. And I keep all of those in that little crumb cup there, and they work, you know, just like the sheets do for, you know, any piece that I might have in the future. I'll have those at my disposal as well. I don't like to waste them because this is not real gold, or actually it's copper, but it's still not inexpensive, so it's good to not waste your product. So now I'm going to begin laying down each of these tissue sheets, and I'm not really worrying about getting each one in the same position that I had it when I was setting them down. That was just sort of like a rough idea of where I wanted them to lay so that I could know where I wanted that foil to be, but I'm just fitting them in wherever they kind of make sense to go and what looks best. I'm laying those down with some of my matte gel medium, and I'm using the heavy bodied stuff right now. I honestly don't have a preference to the liquid or the heavy body. They both have their own uses, and I figured that since some of these tissue pieces were a little bit bunched up and thicker in some places because of the acrylic ink, that it might be better to have a heavier bodied adhesive just to make sure everything gets glued down really well. And once I have them each piece glued down, I also go over it again. I say this in all of my videos. Anytime I do collage work, I lay it down on glue and then I glue over top of it just to make sure that everything is good and stuck down there. So I have the entire piece finished, and this is kind of as far as I got with it in my head when I was working through what I might want to do. But once I got those all laid out, I like the way it looked, but I also thought that maybe it would look a little bit better if I had another layer of them overlapping so that you couldn't see each individual line of the foil, because it was starting to look a little too regular and grid-like to me. So I get back to that in a moment here. This is my second part of this piece. So I have in front of me, this is very exciting. This first time I've used this new gel plate that I got. This is an 18 by 24 inch gel plate that I got as a birthday gift months ago. And this is the first time that I've been using it. And I am taking prints off of some hickory leaves because I like the way that those look, and I thought that might look nice on this piece. So I laid those down on the gel plate. If you are interested in learning more about gel printing, I have hundreds of videos on the channel. Check them out. I'll try to post a couple at the end for you. And I got the majority of the excess paint cleaned off. Now these don't have to be perfect because I'm going to be cutting the leaves out. So it doesn't matter that there's all of that background paint on there. It's not really going to be an issue because that's all going to be gone anyway. So I pulled the print up with some more of the matte medium because I wanted it to be an invisible background there. And that's what I ended up with. I did several of these leaves, and the only thing I wished that I would have done differently is not print them all in black. I like the black, and that was my original intention, but I think it would have been interesting, a little more interesting, to have some done in lighter colors too. But that you see there with the leaves on it, that's just a pickup sheet. I was doing some other printing as well. But anyway, I worked with what I had, and I do like the way it turned out at the end. So just let me know what you think. But if I do something like this again, I'll probably print some other colors. And unfortunately, when I decided this, I didn't have any leaves left to print because they had all been past their prime. So we worked with what we had. But at any rate, I got some really nice prints to use there. So it was at this point that I went back to the piece and decided that I wanted to add those other layers that I was talking about. And I didn't add a ton more. I think maybe just like 4 or 5 additional pieces that I went ahead and made. And I made those a little bit lighter, and I wanted them lighter on purpose because I thought some of the areas were going to be a little too dark to be able to see that black ink of those prints on top of. And I'm glad I did that because I think that really did help with making the pieces a little bit more visible there. But you might notice when I'm putting this down, I'm taking my little card there and intentionally disrupting the sides because I didn't want anything to be too square or too perfect. I wanted this all to have just a very patchwork kind of look to it. So I'm intentionally distressing them a little bit. I like to use these old gift cards for a lot of things, but one thing that I mainly use them for is scraping up excess matte medium when I'm doing my collaging, as you can see me doing there. As I'm putting a good bit down because I want to make sure these really stick, but I also don't need to waste it, and when I scrape that back up, I can still use that again on the next piece. So just in case you were wondering what I was doing there, I'm just cleaning that off a little bit with that old gift card. Oh, so I finally got a new recording rig. My old one was, I had loose wires in it and the lights kept flickering, and I couldn't exactly figure out how to film larger pieces. This is actually the largest piece that I've ever made on my channel. Like I said before, it's a 12 by 24, and I'm so glad I have this ability now because I've been meaning to work larger, and I think this will open up some new possibilities for me. Okay, so now that I've gotten all of the blue tiles glued down, I'm very carefully maneuvering these leaves that I cut out last night. You have to be pretty careful when you're cutting out something that precise with small pieces in tissue paper because it wants to tear, of course. Now, that wouldn't have been the end of the world because I'm gluing this down anyway, and I could have glued down individual pieces. I've done that before when things have ripped or torn when I was working with them, but I was careful this time and everything ended up basically being in one piece. So I'm just positioning those the way I want them and gluing those down as well. Again, putting another coat of the medium down on top just to make sure everything's going to be glued down really well. And then I have the two smaller pieces of the two smaller leaves that I printed, and I'm going to be arranging those on there and doing the same thing. So as I am doing this, I'm starting to feel like the overall feel of the piece has too many cool tones with I love the indigo blue in the background a lot, and I do like that copper peeking out here and there, but it kind of feels like it wasn't enough. And especially using the tissue paper, now it does basically dissolve into the background. However, you can tell definitely that it's there, just the cool tones that it brings. And then with the Mars Black that I printed everything in, it was just a little overall too much of the cool tones. So once I get all of these leaves glued down, I let this dry for a little while. And I mean, the acrylic media doesn't take that long to dry. The matte medium takes roughly the same amount of time as like an acrylic paint would. I ended up deciding to go over the leaves with a warmer tone. So I am mixing a little bit of Golden Brand Azo Gold with some of the matte gel medium. And the Azo Gold is fairly transparent to begin with, but I wanted it even more transparent because I didn't want to lose all of the details in those leaves. So this is basically just creating like a glaze that I'm going to go over everything with. You can't see off camera there. I was just mixing those colors together. But you can see how it just warms everything up nicely and you're still able to see all of the detail beneath. So I go through, and it takes a few minutes to do this, but I'm going through, I started with a color shaper there, but it very quickly became apparent that a brush was going to be the better tool to use for this. So I went in with a couple of different sized brushes and just filled in all of the areas. And as I was filling in those leaves, I was really liking the way that the paint looked as it was gathering on some of the folds in the paper. It was just adding extra visual dimension and more texture on there. And I just really, really liked the way that was looking. So I intentionally went a little heavier with the paint in some areas. I let it build up on the edges in some parts, and I went over it a couple of times in other spots just to make sure everything was really coming through as well as I wanted it to. And I really think that this gave the piece exactly what it needed. You'll have to let me know if you think the same way. Drop me a note in the comments. And also, if you like what I've got going on here, please feel free to hit that thumbs up button. I really appreciate that. It helps me out a lot. And if you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, I would appreciate that as well. That really pushes my channel out to more people, which is something that helps me grow. All right, and here is the end result. I am so happy with the way this turned out. There were several points where I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, but ultimately I think it really came through. You have to let me know what you think, and thank you all so much for joining me again this week. I look forward to seeing you again next week. I put out a new video every Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, so be sure to check back. Take care and have a great week.